in my opinion, I think it's it's probably the most important offseason event, even if you're like a draft fan or not, just like for the league as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. I mean, the combine has been kind of a touchstone for me as well, as far as it was the first real big NFL event I ever got credentialed for.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember hearing stories about it and being like, I just don't quite get what it is, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I talk to people who aren't involved at all with like the NFL or like my job covering the Packers, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And they, you know, when I tell them I'm going to be away for a week, well, where are you going? I'm going to the combine. What is that? Oh, where to start, right? But I did think it would be a good jumping off point for us today as far as, you know, what the combine is, what it is not, why it's still very important, even though you've seen teams around the league starting to kind of keep their coaching staffs at home, where it used to be very much a given that every coaching staff would be there, other than maybe Bill Belichick. But, you know, that change has really kind of solidified here these last few years. But just, yeah, the combine itself, the importance of it. Let me ask you just point blank, like straight out, 30,000-foot view. Why is this still important in an age where everyone's having a pro day? Everyone has access to lots of different information, but they being the 32 NFL teams, still descend on Indianapolis for a week each and every year for this combine. Why is that?
Yeah, like if we're going even further back, like just the furthest zoomed out view of it, the way I view it, even if you're not even looking at the draft, is like football's version of winter meetings. It is an opportunity for teams, agents, media members, scouts, like anyone who's anyone in the NFL to meet in Indianapolis and, you know, network or reestablish those connections. Talk about things that are not related to the draft. Are we bringing this coach in the building? Are we talking to this agent about if the free agent's potentially interested? Things like that. It's a very centralized area and logistically the easiest place to get around to in the winter in the Midwest and East Coast.
No question about it.
Hotels, convention center, and stadium are all connected by tunnels. You do not have to go outside. And I think that's one of the bigger parts and why it's really hard to move it. But if we're talking draft specifically and why it's so important, yes, the athletic testing is a thing. You know, people are opting out of it more and more to do it at their pro days, all of that. But what it's really for is the medical testing more than anything. Indianapolis is home to some of the best hospitals, orthopedic surgeons, anything like that in the country. And logistically, it's just really easy to get these players in and out with their medical evaluations and do all of the other things associated with it. And if we're looking outside of medicals, it's also just an easy way to get interviews. It just all goes back to logistics. There's all this stuff that we need to do for 329 players. How do we do that as efficiently as possible for medicals, interviews, workouts, press availability, all of that, and do it in the span of these kids are in and out in like 5 days, and then they stagger them by position. It's why it's in Indianapolis. It's vitally important because we can do the pro day route, but if you want to do that for every single school for medicals,
I mean, and just imagine booking that travel as a member for each team. Now you got 32 different teams flying all over the country for all these different pro days. That gets hectic.
No, and they already have to do kind of that for during the college football season. But even then, you're only picking and choosing and you have to divide and conquer. You can't do it for everyone. This is the best way to get the 329, you know, theoretically most qualified prospects, even if a few slip through the cracks, get them all in one place and just handle basically all this logistics and admin work almost in a way.
That's
valuable data.
That's a really good point too, because I do think because it's become such a television event, which was, you know, in its inception was never meant to be, right? But of course, the NFL has turned it into a monster tentpole content event, right? And so because of that, I think there's a perception of, you hear a lot about the underwear Olympics, right? The fact that these guys are running around on Lucas Oil Field Stadium, just like going through those athletic drills. Well, it's not real football. They're not going up against the defense. They're not really the whole point of this. And this is where I think it somewhat gets lost because of the presentation by the league trying to make it a kind of primetime event. You know, it's data collection.
Yes.
It's 100% what it is. You just got to think of these guys as each being a line on a spreadsheet, right? And you're looking at their 40 time, their 3-cone, all the different kind of testing they go through. It's not necessarily that they're competing, though you do hear that a lot when it comes to the quarterbacks either throwing or not throwing, and we'll get into that. But it's not a competition. It's a baseline that you as a personnel person can just easily lay out and see how that matches not only to your scouting and what you've done all year film work wise, but also in comparison to not just each other in this draft class, but past draft classes, guys you've got on your roster. It's just a very easy way to have a quick snapshot of a guy's athletic ability. And I think that's what gets lost here.
100%. And I mean, it's guys like Kent Lee Platt who does RAS or relative athletic score. Like, this is his Super Bowl. Like, all this data,
truly, right?
And I love Kent. Shout out him. He's the absolute man. He's a great guy. I'm sure he'll be there. But he, like, guys like that for the data collection, whether you're internal in an NFL team or outside, and just trying to basically figure out ways to quantify athleticism. It's great. But my favorite thing is, football is always this battle between analytics and, like, quote unquote vibes.
It has become that, has it not?
Internally,
No,
I'm a huge fan of both. I think both hold very important places. And the combine does just that. We're talking about all the data collection, but these interviews are important too. I think one of my favorite interviews, they aren't usually publicly available, but that one of the Bills meeting with Keon Coleman. And you see how smart this kid is, but also just like how hilarious of a person he is. And like that stuff does matter too to football teams. So
no question.
I think I would still heavily weight the data collection aspect of it. But for some of these teams, getting your entire front office and most of your coaching staff or bits of it in a room with a guy is incredibly valuable as well.
Now, what do you make of, you mentioned coaching staffs, and like I said at the top here, there are more and more staff staying away. I think it really, I mean, obviously I joke about the Bill Belichick thing, who just kind of essentially would obviously be there, but would never make himself available to the media. And that has now kind of turned into, I think it was McVay who really started, like, he kept his whole staff back in LA, and he was like, we can just get more work done here remotely, et cetera. And then now you've seen there are a handful of teams that do this, including the Packers. The last 2 years, Matt LaFleur and his staff don't make the trek anymore. What do you make of that? Do you think that's kind of where this is headed as far as it's going to be a strict personnel guy event? Because to your point, I will admit, as a media member, I kind of, I'm not dismayed, but I'm disappointed because it was a great opportunity. Like you said, everyone from the NFL was centralized for a week. I had so many great opportunities to talk to guys on staff and talk about the potential for a player maybe you didn't see all year, because you always hear like, well, they see them every day in practice. Well, it was a great opportunity to talk to, okay, what about this guy that you drafted last year that didn't get on the field a whole lot? Yeah. That opportunity has certainly been robbed. And as a media member, I'm dismayed.
And as a Packers fan, what is Tyron Hopper been up to?
There you go. There's a question.
Yeah, I think I don't know anything concrete, right? But like I can have some theories. I imagine the implementation of Zoom in the COVID era has made like telecommunication a lot easier for guys to sit in interviews. Does a coach really want to fly all the way to Indianapolis and only be involved in just the interview portion of this when their front office is handling everything? Could also just be a theory of too many cooks in the kitchen. How involved as a GM do you want your coaching staff in these decisions? I'm sure you do a bit, but do you want them just kind of hovering over every little bit of this? And then also free agency is about to start. These guys are probably trying to work with the pro personnel department as far as free agents they want to target or which guys they want to keep internally. And I know coaches, they're always watching film. I'm sure they are more interested in the film of these prospects than these interviews. Right. For me, I just imagine it's a convenience thing, but it does stink. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago getting to see LaFleur in person, and he is confirmed not going. I would just imagine he's not.
No, they haven't announced it, but I would be shocked if he's on his way. I know we've already set up time with Brian Gutekunst, and we haven't had a mention of LaFleur, so I suspect that's the same. And there's one other kind of wrinkle there that I think is possibly maybe driving some of it. And I do agree that since the COVID era, it's been, that's right, we can do almost all of our work remotely. I think that's part of it. But I think it also allows staffs to stay together and not get kind of networked to another team, as it were. Like, I know a lot of guys come down to Indy who don't have jobs, right? Kind of trying to network and trying to find maybe, a connection or two. And if you're a coach and say, maybe a little bit paranoid, you don't want your dudes mingling all week, talking to people, finding about other opportunities and things like that. I mean, most of these staffs are set by now, but you never know what seeds are going to be planted down the road, right? So I think there's a little element to that as well.
I can totally see that. I mean, I'm still thinking about the Jets D-line coach that, worked with Saleh and got interviewed by the Packers and maybe down like a couple years ago at the combine started talking about stuff like that.
You never know when
I'm sure that happens all the time. Yeah.
100%.